Hi, I'm David C. I am from Van Cleve. I grew up in Ocean Springs, and I'm back in Van Cleve. I was saved at an early age, around 12, and some things popped up in my life, so I ran. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn. My own family was kind of confused in what was going on, and they were going on through some things as well, so they didn't know how to lead me through it. And I just turned to a life of sin and just went down a really bad path of places that I didn't need to be and around people I didn't need to be around. That led into other things, more drugs, more bad decisions, going to jail, went to jail twice. Every bad decision I made and every situation I put myself in, I kept pushing myself further and further away from God because I was trying to distance myself from God. I truly believe that I was too far removed. I was too unclean. I was too broken. What finally brought me back to church and what made me finally say yes was me and my wife were at the lowest point in our marriage. We were about a month or so out from making everything finalized. We had already signed and done all the things we needed. She had joined a women's group and felt something, you know what I mean? Like she just felt compelled, and I guess it was God leaning in her ear telling her, hey, you need to get him back in here. She did, and I finally chose. I was like, you know what, I'll go back, but I want to go to where I want to go. And I'd heard so many great things about this church, a lot of great things. Came in and sat in the back. Brandon started preaching, and it was one of those Sundays to where you got here and it felt like Brandon was talking right to you. We said, maybe we can do this. Let's take some baby steps. And one Sunday after another, it brought us back together, and we gave it another shot. Brandon had a man-to-man group night, I guess you'd say. Some of the stuff that he had brought up in there had really resonated with me, and in that moment, I guess if I had to pinpoint it down to one moment where I felt like I had a second chance, was that night. I wasn't there with my wife. I wasn't there with my kids. I wasn't there with anyone else. I was there to hear a message from God. That message really moved me. What has changed in my life since I decided to come back to God? Quite simply, everything. Our finances, our relationship, mine and my wife's relationship, has never been better. God has used people in the church to change me and give me a second chance, or help me realize my second chance. Greg is been a major part of my life, and I'm sorry. I have never in my life felt God use another man to work in my life the way this man has. Greg told me that he was going to challenge me, and my God, has he. We're almost the same age, and he feels like a father in my life. It is so powerful to have someone that you can go to and can lead you when you don't know what to do or what to say, when you're lost. You have a lifeline back to God, back to where you need to be. I can't thank him enough. When I was running from God, the ways that I felt that he was pursuing me, it's going to sound a little cliched. I saw him everywhere and I felt him everywhere. Oftentimes it was in my face. He was looking at me, so to speak. If you're feeling like you're too far removed, the second chance is always there. It's always waiting for you. I think of it in ways like how my children, where they do something that they're not supposed to, and they're afraid to tell me, or they're afraid to talk to me. I try to think, how am I gonna make my kids feel safe and loved enough to where they can come to me and know that I'm always gonna be there with them. And I guess in a way, God's doing the same thing. He's the Father. He's always gonna be there. If you're scared to come back to God, let's say you feel so bad that you can't go to church, the number one thing that you could do, just pray. Talk to him any chance you can. When you're mad, when you're angry, when you're frustrated, you'll realize that he's been there the whole time. No matter what you've done, where you've been, where you've gone, the second chance will always be there. And he's always there with his hand out saying, I'm here. Let's turn this around.
Yeah. Takes a lot of courage for a man to share a story like that, and so we're really grateful for what God's doing in David's life and his willingness to share it. The reason I love that story so much is because it's a story about a man who got a second chance. And what I really love about that story is that my buddy David is making the most of his second chance. You see, the truth is, at some point in your life, you are going to need a second chance. And thankfully, what you're going to learn today is that God is all about second chances. That's David's story that you just saw in the video. That's my story. I've shared that with you a number of different times. But it's also Jonah's story, that this guy that we've been studying together for the last month. Every single one of us, at some point in our life, we ran from God, and then God said, I'm willing to give you a second chance. Now, the question that I want to wrestle with today is simply this. Everybody gets a second chance, but are you going to waste your second chance? Or are you going to make the most of your second chance? See, everybody gets it. But a lot of people, they're not prepared for it, and so they end up wasting their second chance. I want to make sure that that doesn't happen in your life. And so today, we're going to spend some time looking at the story of Jonah, but we're also going to be looking at some things that happened in the life of the Ninevites, the very people that Jonah was trying to reach. With that in mind, I'm going to jump into Jonah chapter 3, verses 1 through 4, where the Bible says this. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. If you're following along in your Jonah Bible journal, I want you to underline that phrase, a second time. Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you. Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went to Nineveh. Now, Nineveh was a very large city. It took 3 days to go through it. Jonah began by going a day's journey into the city, proclaiming 40 more days, and Nineveh will be overthrown. Now, I got to tell you, I love that the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time because it gives me hope. It gives me hope that there is a God in heaven who doesn't treat me the way most people treat me. God doesn't unfriend me or cancel me. When I blow it, He doesn't block me or ghost me. He doesn't divorce me or fire me. Instead, He gives me a second chance. Now, I want to point something out to you that I think is very, very important. When God spoke to Jonah the second time, it was the exact same instructions that God gave him the very first time. I need you to think about this. There is a big difference between a second chance and a fresh start, right? Any golfers out there? It's kind of like a mulligan in golf, right? You hit a terrible shot, and if your buddy is gracious and if your buddy loves you and wants you to have a good day on the golf course, they'll say, come on, dude, just take a mulligan, right? You barely hit it off the tee or duck hook it into the woods. They give you a second chance. It's a second chance at the same shot without keeping score of the mistake you just made. You don't deserve it. You haven't done anything to earn it. It's just given to you out of grace and love. I want you to know that God loves you and He is gracious toward you, so much so He's willing to give you a second chance. But in Jonah's case, it's a second chance at the exact same shot. A lot of people in this world, they don't want a second chance at their old marriage. They'd rather have a fresh start in a new marriage. That's not what we're talking about. There are a lot of people in this world who don't want a second chance at the same job. They'd rather just move on and have a clean slate and a fresh start at a new job. That's not what we're talking about. Jonah is being given a second chance, but it's a second chance at the exact same job. And so let me just ask you, what was the last thing God told you to do that you didn't do? Well, we're not moving on to something new. We're just going to go back to the same thing that God's been saying to us over and over and over again. What is the last thing that God told you to do that you didn't do? I really want you to think about that question. I don't have to know the answer, but you need to know the answer. Did God tell you again to end that relationship? Did God tell you again to go back to your family and reconcile? Did God tell you again to start giving something or start serving something? Did God tell you again to apologize or to forgive? Did God tell you again to give up the bad habit? Whatever it is in your life, I got really good news for you. God is giving you a second chance. It's a second chance to obey God and to get right what you previously got wrong. Do not waste your second chance. The first time God told Jonah, you're going to go to Nineveh. He didn't do it. Second time, God says, Jonah, you're going to Nineveh. You're going to go to Nineveh and you're going to preach to them the message that I give you to proclaim. Now, if you were to look in the original Hebrew language at that word go, does anybody know what that word means? None of you know it in the original Hebrew. In the original Hebrew, the word go, it means to go, okay? This isn't rocket science, okay? God is not overly complicated or trying to be so in-depth that you get confused, okay? God says go as in go now, go today, go immediately. So important for you to understand this. Young and old people, okay? Delayed obedience is the same as disobedience. God is telling Jonah, we're not playing any more games. No more detours. No more delays. No more running from God. You're going to go and you're going to do it now. And so whatever God is telling you to do it now. End it now. Forgive them now. Apologize now. Invite them to Easter at the Colosseum now. Start serving now. Whatever it is, stop putting it off. If you keep putting it off, you're going to waste your second chance. According to verse 3, Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord, and this time he went to Nineveh. Now, I do not want you to miss this. It's subtle, but it is so significant for you to understand. One of my favorite parts of the story. If you were to just compare and contrast what happened in Jonah's life when he disobeyed God versus what happened in his life when he decided to obey God, you would see that there was a stark difference between the two. When Jonah obeys this time around, please notice there is no violent storm. When he obeys this time around, please notice there is no damage to the boat. No cargo is being thrown into the sea. Jonah is not being thrown overboard on the brink of drowning in the ocean. Jonah is not in a place where he's being swallowed alive by a great fish. The people are not living in fear of their lives. Why? Because when you obey God, you don't have to deal with all of that stuff. That's why obedience is so critical and essential to your second chance. I watch a lot of people deal with a lot of unnecessary hardship and drama and stress, all because they disobeyed when they should have simply obeyed. And because disobedience is so normal in our culture, because disobedience is so normal in our families of origin, we think in our minds that all of the difficulties and all of the stress and all of the drama and all of the hardship, well, that's just a normal part of life too. Listen to me. That may be the pattern that you see in society, but that was never part of God's plan. Are a lot of people in the world paying child support? Oh, yeah. But was it God's plan for people to be paying all that child support? No, it's the pattern, but it's not God's plan. Are a lot of people in the world living with anxiety and depression? Oh, the statistics would blow your mind. But was it God's plan for everybody to be struggling with anxiety and depression? No. Are a lot of people drowning in debt, living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to pay their bills? Yes, it's the pattern, but it was never God's plan. are a lot of families falling apart, marriages ending in divorce, and young children growing up without a father or a mother in their home. Yes, it is the pattern, but it is not God's plan. Now, I'm not telling you that if you just obey, then everything in life is going to go your way and that life is going to be incredibly easy and that God is going to bless everything that you do. But I am telling you that if you would simply obey, there will be a lot of unnecessary stress. There will be a lot of unnecessary drama. There will be a lot of unnecessary hardship that you don't have to deal with, that everyone else is dealing with. If you look at Jonah's life, when Jonah obeys, things in his life go much more smoothly. Obedience is so critical and essential to your second chance. Now, that being said, I do believe that Jonah obeyed. But I do not believe that Jonah made the most of his second chance. And the reason I say that is because I see three things in Jonah's life that are missing, and I'm going to share them with you because I do not want you to miss it. Number one, I would tell you that he did the bare minimum. Number two, he said the bare minimum. And then number three, his heart wasn't in it. I want you to look at those three things, and I want you to think back to David's story at the top of the message. If you were to compare and contrast those things in Jonah's life against the things that we saw and heard in David's life, you would see a radical difference, right? He did the bare minimum. That's Jonah. Okay, let me ask you, was David doing the bare minimum? Only come to church once, maybe twice a month so he could check the box? No, he said, I was in church every single week. He got a mentor and a guy named Greg. He was showing up for the man-to-man event. He wasn't doing the bare minimum. He wasn't saying the bare minimum, right? He was opening up with Greg. He was talking about the struggles in his life. He was honest about the mistakes that he was making. He was processing with Greg and other pastors major decisions that he was making. His wife had people in her life. He had people in his life. They weren't doing and saying the bare minimum. Number three, his heart wasn't in it. That's Jonah, but that was not David. Did you see the emotion in David when he started talking about Greg and the impact he had on his life? That's a man who's going, I want to make the most of my second chance. But that's not what Jonah was doing. And because of that, I really do believe that Jonah did not make the most of his second chance. I believe that God changed Nineveh not because of Jonah, but in spite of Jonah. I believe that God changed the city of Nineveh not because of something that Jonah said or did, but because of the things that the Ninevites said and did, and even because of the things that God said and did. If you look back in verse 3, we're told that yes, Jonah obeys and he goes to Nineveh, but then we're told that the city of Nineveh is so large that it would take a man 3 full days to walk from one end of the city all the way to the other. Now, unfortunately, when we read the entire book of Jonah about Jonah's time in Nineveh, the only thing that we're told about his time is in chapter 3, verse 4, where we read this. Jonah began by going a day's journey into the city. Not 3 days, but 1 day. Now, I cannot swear to you on my life that Jonah didn't go further into the city and that the Bible just didn't include that specific detail. But what I can say is that the only thing the Bible tells us about Jonah's journey through Nineveh is that he went 1 day, not 3 days. It seems like Jonah did the bare minimum. It seems like Jonah said the bare minimum. As Jonah walks through this city reluctantly, yes, he proclaims the message that God gave to him. And this is what he said. He said, 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I've been in church all my life, and I have heard a lot of really bad sermons, okay? That is the worst sermon that I have ever heard in my entire life. In fact, scholars have made it a point to highlight for us that in the original language, the total number of words that Jonah used in the Hebrew, it was only 5 words long. 5 words. As he walks through the city of Nineveh, he just says these 5 words over and over again. Now, I just want you to think about this for a minute. Can you imagine if I did something like that? Can you imagine if the band came out here and they played this incredible worship set and got everybody excited about what they were going to learn from God today? And then there's this powerful video story where David's like talking about what God's been doing in his life. And then I walk out here on the stage and I just say something like, turn or burn. And then I drop the mic and I'm like, I'm out, right? No powerful stories. No incredible points. No convicting questions. No funny jokes. There's not even a mention of God in his sermon. He doesn't even talk to the Ninevites about the things that they are doing wrong specifically. He just walks through town and in a very casual and reluctant way, he declares these 5 Hebrew words. He did the bare minimum and he said the bare minimum. And that's my concern for a lot of people in the world today. They want a second chance. But when they're given the second chance, they do the bare minimum and they say the bare minimum. And so, yeah, they go to church 1 or maybe 2 times a month. They don't read their Bible. They never pray and talk to God about what's going on in their life. They haven't severed any of their old relationships. They haven't started any new Christian-based relationships. They're not going to counseling. They're not meeting with a pastor. They're not talking about the mistakes they made and the lessons they need to learn. There's no accountability in their life. In fact, they continue to hide all of the secret sins that they struggle with. If that's you, you're doing the bare minimum and you're saying the bare minimum. And if that happens, you will waste your second chance because your heart isn't really in it. Jonah's heart wasn't really in it. See, Jonah didn't want the Ninevites to be saved. Jonah wanted the Ninevites to burn in hell for what they had done to other people. Now, if you don't know what the Ninevites did to other people, a few decades ago, archaeologists actually found a library buried in the ancient city of Nineveh. In this library, there were all kinds of books where leaders and kings would document in a very boastful way about the kinds of cruel things that they did to their enemies. For example, King Shalmaneser was an Assyrian king who lived in the capital city of Nineveh. And he once wrote about how he had conquered another city. And then he brags in these writings about what he did to the people of that city. Listen to what he wrote. He said, "A pyramid of heads I reared in front of his city. Their youths and their maidens I burnt up in the flames." This dude was so cruel and so violent that after they conquered the city, they took all the heads of all the men and they created an elaborate pyramid so that they could take a picture and post it on all their social media accounts, right? You know what they did with the women and children? They burned them alive. And he bragged about it. Later, King Ashurbanipal, another Assyrian king who also lived in the capital city of Nineveh, he defeated another king in battle and he captured that king. And then he wrote about what he did to that king. Listen to what he said. He said, "I pierced his chin with my keen hand dagger, Through his jaw I passed a rope, put a dog chain upon him, and made him occupy a kennel. Other writings that were discovered in this library, they bragged about how they skinned their enemies alive and would even cut off their lips. These people were barbaric. They were incredibly cruel. The Bible uses the word wicked. And because of that, Jonah's heart wasn't really in it. Now, listen to me. If God gives you a second chance, and you say the bare minimum, and you do the bare minimum, and your heart isn't really in it, you are going to waste your second chance. You are going to end up making a lot of the same decisions, repeating a lot of the same mistakes, and getting right back into that same old way of life all over again. Now, what's really ironic, not just about today's passage, but the entire book of Jonah, is that you would expect that the prophet of God would be the one who's making the most of his second chance. And you would expect these evil, wicked people called the Ninevites to be the ones who are wasting their second chance. But that's not what happened. As sad and pathetic as Jonah's message was, he told them, you've been warned. You've got 40 days to change your ways, or God is going to turn your little kingdom into a pile of rubble. Now watch how they responded. Jonah 3, 5 through 10. This is what it looks like to make the most of your second chance. The Ninevites believed God. A fast was proclaimed, and all of them, from the greatest to the least, they put on sackcloth. When Jonah's warning reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne. He took off his royal robes. He covered himself with sackcloth and sat down in the dust. This is the proclamation he issued in Nineveh by the decree of the king and his nobles. Do not let people or animals, herds or flocks taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink, but let people and animals be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call, I want you to underline or circle this word in your Bible, urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented. And he did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened. Now, if you're here and you're thinking to yourself, Brandon, I would love to have a second chance. But you don't know the things I've done. You don't know how bad I've been. You don't know how many people I've hurt. I promise you this. If God can give the Ninevites a second chance, he can give you a second chance. Now, Jonah's message was only 5 Hebrew words, but 5 Hebrew words is all it took because God was working in miraculous ways before Jonah ever even opened his mouth. This is so interesting. I learned this new just in the last month. Do you know what gods the Ninevites worshipped before they met the one true God of the Bible? They worshipped a god whose name was Dagon. And Dagon was what they called the fish god. In fact, they have ancient rocks and stones where they have tried to recreate pictures of what Dagon, the fish god, was like. Now, I just want you to think about this for just a minute from the perspective of the Ninevites. Okay? If you worship the fish god, and then you hear that a giant fish has just spit a man out on dry ground, and that he comes walking through your city saying you got 40 days before God turns your city into a pile of rubble, do you really need to hear anything else? I'm telling you, I don't need to hear anything else, right? That is a very convincing moment. And so you know what the Ninevites did when they heard this message? According to verse 5, the Ninevites believed God. Now, let me make a really important distinction for you. Pastor Craig Rochelle, in his comments on Jonah, he has pointed out that there is a big difference between believing in God and believing God, right? There are a lot of people in the world who believe in a God. They believe in some form of a higher power, but they don't believe what God has said in His warnings about sin and judgment and salvation and Jesus. Prior to this, the Ninevites, they believed in some god named Dagon, the fish god. But that's not what verse 5 is talking about. They've now made a pivot to where instead of just believing in a god, the Ninevites actually believed God. They believed the warning that God had given to them through the prophet Jonah. Now listen to me. In order to make the most of your second chance, you have to believe what God has said. You have to believe what God has said about sin. That it's not just bad for you, it's hurting everyone around you. You have to believe what God has said about judgment. You have to believe what God says about salvation through His Son, Jesus Christ. That ultimately in life, it's not just about being better, it's about being forgiven. And that is something that can only happen through the person and the work of Jesus Christ. See, these people in Nineveh, they made the most of their second chance because they believed God. They didn't just say that they believed in God, they showed that they believed in God. You could look and you could see the evidence in their lives that they went from disobeying God to actually obeying God. The text says they put an end to their violent ways. The text says that they declared a fast, which means they stopped eating and they started praying. They stopped eating because it was their way of saying, God, the most important thing in our lives right now is getting right with you. It's even more important than our next meal. After they started fasting, it says that they put on sackcloth. In fact, if you look down in verse 6, this is what we read. When Jonah's warning reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne. He took off his royal robes. He covered himself with sackcloth and sat down in the dust. This king is getting off of his throne and he's declaring, I'm not the man in charge. God is in charge. This is an incredible display of humility. This king is saying, I have been wrong and God is always right. Listen to me, in order to make the most of your second chance, you have to be humble. You got to be humble enough to admit that your way is what got you into that mess. And that God's way is the only way to get out of that mess. You cannot continue to operate in a spirit of pride as if I do what I want and I answer to no one. If you look down in verse 8, the king then said, let everyone call urgently on God. Listen to me, they felt a sense of urgency that most of us were never going to feel in our lives. They were told, you have 40 days until you will feel the full extent of God's wrath on your life. The clock was ticking. Can you imagine if God gave me a word and I told you today, you got 40 days to change your life before God wrecks everything and everyone in your precious little kingdom. In order to make the most of your second chance, you have to pursue God with a sense of urgency. Yes, Mosaic Church is a casual environment. But I want to make something very, very clear. There is nothing that is casual about our faith. If you really want to make the most of your second chance, you cannot pursue God when it's convenient for you. If you really want to make the most of your second chance, you cannot pursue God when there's nothing better for you to do. You pursue God with a sense of urgency, like He is the most important thing in your life, because He is, whether you realize it or not. Now, if you do that, I promise you this, you are going to make the most of your second chance, just like the Ninevites did. Look back in verse 10. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, He relented and did not bring on them the destruction He had threatened. When they changed their hearts, God changed His response. When they turned from their sin, God turned from His judgment. Because that's who God is. He is the God of second chances. So I want to ask you one more time. What will you do with your second chance? You're going to say as little as possible because you don't want anybody to know your business, or you're too intimidated and insecure to talk about God and to ask questions and to admit that you don't know anything. You're going to do as little as possible, going through the motions and checking the box that says, yeah, I went to church this month or this week. No community, no accountability, no confession. You're going to do those kinds of things because your heart isn't really in it? Or are you going to make the most of your second chance like the Ninevites did by believing what God has said, by responding in humility, by turning from that sin, and by pursuing Him like He is the most important thing in your life? You've all got a second chance. Don't waste it. Make the most of it. Let's pray together. As we bow in a spirit of prayer, I just want to start, God, by thanking You so much for second chances. God, when I think about the mistakes I've made and the mess that I've made in my life, I am so grateful for the second chances that You give. God, I want to pray for those people who came here today, maybe because someone invited them to church or because life is messy right now. They came maybe looking for hope or answers or direction, but they don't have a relationship with You. In fact, maybe like Jonah, they've been running from You. Like the Ninevites, they've been disobeying You. God, would You just speak to them right now and let them know that a second chance is on the table? But it all starts with Your Son, Jesus Christ. If you are not a follower of Jesus, you can become one right where you sit. Right where you sit, I want you to pray and say, God, I need a second chance. I want you to say, God, I need Jesus to forgive my sins. I need Jesus to start leading my life. I make a mess out of my life, but I'm trusting that Jesus can make my life better. If that's a decision that you're making today, I want you to text the word Jesus to the number on the side screens. And the reason I want you to do that is because I do not want you leaving here saying as little as possible, doing as little as possible, because your heart isn't really in it. Listen, there's a pastor on our team that you need to be talking to about the mistakes you've made, about why you need a second chance, about what you need to learn from your past so that you do not repeat that mistake in the future. You need to be honest about the sins you struggle with, the questions that you have. And so please text the word Jesus to the number on the side screens. Finally, God, I just want to pray for those of us who already are followers of Jesus. We thank You so much for the second chances. But God, I pray that today You would impress on our hearts and in our minds exactly what we need to hear and what we need to know and what we need to do to make the most of our second chance. I pray all of these things in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen.